pull it off. Yeah.
So anyway, Sarah, we've had a chat before. We did a really good discussion about wellness in the workplace, didn't we? And for anyone who's never met you before, knows anything about you, you can chat a little bit more about your background. But you're a leadership and management coach, an NLP practitioner, and founder of Mind the Gap Academy. Is that correct?
That is indeed, yes. So with a 25 years glorious history in PR and comms, so which is why it's all the stuff that I do is very relevant to the marketing and communications industry.
And we're talking about at the moment, we were just talking before we went live to record, obviously in a bit of a state of flux at the moment, but people have returned to the office, some people haven't. I know my husband is still working at home for 15 months, he's never been back into the office again. But as a business, as we start to return to some sort of normality, or the office, or wherever that may be, we're now hearing this term hybrid working. But kind of what does that mean? I know I wasn't too sure at first what that meant.
Well, I think ultimately it's going to mean different things for different people. And I think that is the absolute key going forward, is that you know, like most things in life, there's not a one size fits all. I mean, ultimately it's a blended working model, isn't it? Just like the best way you get out of any learning is you look at a blended approach, whether it's words, videos, pictures, presentations. With blended working or hybrid working, we're looking at a mixture of your home office and your work office. So the phrase that I really love is concentration at home, collaboration in the office. And I think we're really missing that. And I know we're going to come on and talk about that in a little bit more, but there's no hard or fast rules anymore. And I think the best agencies, the best consultancies out there are the ones that are going to be flexible in their approach, or are going to be able to evolve as things move. You know, who knew that 18 months ago we were going to be talking about a hybrid working model? And now we've got an opportunity to look at how blended working works better for all of us.
I like that phrase, blended working. Hybrid sounds, I don't know, quite strange, doesn't it? Like a car.
Yeah. It reminds me of my car hybrid working, but I sort of see it, how it, you know. So it's funny, actually, you were just saying there that, you know, how the PR industry has been ready to embrace this hybrid model. And I know a recent study by the PRCA indicated this as well. And you work with so many different PR agencies, Sarah. Is this something you're hearing more and more of then, the whole hybrid working model being embraced? Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I think that there was a report that came out, I think yesterday or the day before, by Microsoft that said in general, 70% of workers want a more flexible remote working model to continue. Now, I think there's a real shift change in pattern and how we want to work in the future. I think we've got to be really, really aware of our different levels within our different organisations, because the people that are 40 plus and, you know, living with kids and have, you know, might have a partner at home, working at home might be an all right environment for them. It might be something that actually gives them a gift of time. If you're looking, and this is what I've found so far, is if you're working with account execs and account managers who might be living on a flat on their own, they might be away from their friends and their family, it becomes a really, really insular place. So the benefit of hybrid working or blended working or whatever we want to call it is we have to be aware of where everybody is in the organisation. We have to understand where they are and what they need from that connection and collaboration. And that's the key. But yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, everyone that I'm talking to is looking at a new model going forward, which I think is great, actually, from a culture point of view and B, a wellbeing point of view.
Totally. I think, you know, in the past, I'm probably, you're the same, Lee, and you, Sarah, working in PR, I used to work at home a day when I had content to write. So I was writing marketing material or a website or something like that I really need to get my head down on. But yeah, you forget everyone's different environments. I was walking along yesterday and looked in and could see a guy working in the middle of like a children's toy room with his computer in the middle surrounded by toys. And, you know, it's difficult, isn't it, for people? Going back to sort of mainly PR agencies, because obviously we have in-house here at PRCA as well, but we have a lot of PR agencies. They're very renowned in the past for their work hard, play hard model, which many people thrive upon. I know I used to love all the socials and going out and burning the candle when I was a bit younger. But obviously the last 18 months have really changed things and in the world of PR. Do you think we will ever go back to that desk bound? I mean, that's kind of moving on from what you just said. Or do you think there has really been a shift? Because I'm wondering whether in like 2 years' time, people suddenly migrate back to 5 days a week at the desk, working really long hours again.
Gosh, that work hard, play hard culture. I mean, something that, you know, I grew up on in PR. You know, I do remember being in Manchester working for a fab agency that no longer exists, unfortunately, Staniforth, and we'd be working on pitches till 11 o'clock at night. We'd fall out of the office and fall into the boardwalk next door, you know, and it was brilliant because the only rule was when we got in the morning, you know, we had to be at our desk for 9 o'clock, even though if we were asleep at our desks or eating cheese and bacon butters. And I do think it's changing, you know, and I do think that PR is a very, very social environment to be in. You know, I remember when I was looking at different careers, and, you know, you put into the computer back in the day what you were good at. And one of my teachers said to me, well, you're really good at talking, you should be in PR. And it was like, right, okay, thanks very much for that. I'm not sure it was a compliment at the time. But, you know, so it's a very, very social world to live in. And we don't want to lose that. And we don't want to lose that connection with people. And that connection with people also brings creativity, you know, and I think that's key in what we do in our industry. You know, the creativity, the mastering the art of the whole communications mix is a fundamental part of how we move forward. But I do think that the last 18 months has changed the shift pattern. But I don't think it means that we're all going to be stuck working on our computers on Zoom, shouting, you're on mute for the rest of our lives. But what I do think is that people, and I've seen this from agencies on every single level, people are aware of the importance of mental health and well-being at work. And I think that's a global shift, not just in PR and not just in the UK, is we're all really aware that digital exhaustion is real. And, you know, we're all struggling with burnout, and the danger of working remotely is you've got that always on vibe going on, and people are now contacting you through email, Zoom, Teams, WhatsApp. You know, you can't escape it, can you? So I think that we've got a responsibility as an industry to, one, make sure that we keep the connection and the collaboration that's in the office, but importantly, within this shift, in this change, we work on that always on, because I think that the long hours that happen in the office and then people could switch off when they leave, I think that's the danger. That's not necessarily happening anymore. So people are always on when they're in the office, but, you know, blimey, they're always on when they're at home as well. And, you know, if their boss sends them an email at 7 o'clock, because that's when it suits them, they're then freaking because should they be responding and things like that. So I think that's what we've got to manage moving forward.
And I think it's so fascinating. I think there's also a level of consideration that we have to have for colleagues as well. And like you were talking just then about social media platforms, you know, and sometimes my heart skips a beat when I get a WhatsApp at like 10:30 at night when I'm just trying to wind down. And you're right, I think that's the world that we've been living in. And it was also really interesting how you talked about the physical connection that people all need. And I totally embrace that and believe in that. And people are obviously skeptical and a bit nervous when it comes to change. So how can you make sure that the hybrid model works for everyone?
You can't. You know, that's the honest answer, isn't it? We can't do that. What we can do is talk. And I think, again, this is where a huge culture shift is coming, is that the culture of any organisation, I firmly believe, has to be leadership led. You know, it's a top down culture that, you know, you can only permeate a culture from the top layers of that organisation, because those people have to live and breathe it. So if those leaders are living and breathing a culture shift that's best for the rest of the people in their care, then the best thing that they can do is talk to everybody, talk to the receptionist, talk to the account execs, talk to their colleagues, talk to their peers. And something that I think that's really lovely that I've seen happening is, instead of being in this very sort of insular, this is our agency and we daren't talk to other people in the world of agency, talk to other agency heads and find out what they're doing, because they might have a different approach that you might want to then use in your agency that works for your team. But the key is that collaboration and that connection, and coaching-led leadership, I think, is absolutely crucial. You know, there's no more of that, you know, command and control leadership going forward. I think the people that have
servant leadership, kind leadership, coaching-led leadership are the ones that are going to see their hybrid and blended working models working best for everybody. And the key is learning how to listen, you know, and watching out for those flags, because the danger of the environments that we're in now in this remote working is that as a leader, as a boss, as a manager, you know, you are the boss, the therapist, the disciplinarian, the person that's going to check that they're all right. And if someone's slightly removed from you, you're not actually maybe noticing the signals, you know. So when someone's walking down the corridor, as we've all been in that situation, you know, with that silent tear rolling down your face because something hideous has happened, you've made a mistake, you think the world's over, your boss has been, you know, not happy with you, or a client's been crappy with you, you know, we're not seeing that so much on this remote working environment. And that's what we've got to be careful of. So I think that as much as we've got to look at the positives of it, we've got to watch out for the flags, for burnout, for distress, for discomfort, for exhaustion, because that danger of always on, as I talked about, that digital overload is real, and we've got to be really careful of that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's a really weird process, place we're in at the minute. And I think for agency leaders as well, as you say, you've got to be the boss and the therapist and all of that. And obviously you've got to run your business at the end of the day. I mean, trying to tick boxes for so many different people, maybe different ages and different backgrounds, and to keep everybody happy, it's quite a different one moving forward. And I know my shift in the working world, and probably with Lee as well, has changed dramatically over the last few years. Just going on a little bit more about sort of face-to-face relationships again and sparking creativity, because I know that's something that I always really enjoy. I'm not sure always I can get as creative as I want on this Zoom world. Francis, our Director General, said recently, ours is a social industry, one in which teams are built and creativity is sparked through face-to-face relationships. There are elements of our practice which simply cannot be replaced by Zoom calls. So just to moving on from what we said, how do we find that right balance going forward to keep that creativity going?
I think we have to work on that, you know, and I think that we have to work on how best to get creativity out of people, you know, understanding how the people in your team work. Is it, you know, are they auditory, are they visual, are they kinesthetic, are they more led by emotions, and how you pull that out of them. Now, I completely agree, the best way of pushing creativity, of manifesting creativity, is face-to-face. You know, that spark that you get of sitting in a room with someone, having a giggle, someone coming up with the weirdest, most ridiculous idea, but then actually that sparks something, you know, that can be really campaign-led. I think that really does come from face-to-face contact. That's from face-to-face working. But I think equally, let's not forget the power of, the shower moment, when you're in the shower at 3 o'clock in the morning, and actually you'd never be in the shower at 3 o'clock in the morning. When you're in the shower or you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning is what I'm trying to say. You know, and suddenly you've got that clarity and that idea, and you can see what you should be doing. And that is really key in creativity in general. And it's called, from a scientific point of view, it's called the default mode network in our brain. And that default mode network, actually what that does is it's how our brain processes things when it's resting. And actually, therefore, that's where we have those light bulb moments. So let's not forget that, yes, fundamentally, I think having an ideas factory like I know Brazen do in the office, I know that, you know, other companies that I'm working with have great ways of getting and pushing that creativity. But let's not forget that it can come as well from those moments where you're letting your brain rest and you're going, oh, wow, I've got it. I get what I need to do now.
Or when you're in the pub.
You
have a drink and you're like, I forgot. Or the next day you wake up and you're like, I can't remember what I've had, but a really good idea. And I've had a few too many glasses of wine.
Yeah. Well, I'm convinced that's where, again, back in the day of Stanyforth, most of our ideas were literally on the back of a fag packet, because we were usually in the pub writing them down and then going back to the office to sort them out.
It just reminds me so much of the days when I worked in magazines and we'd go for a brainstorm or mind mapping walk, and you'd be there going, I need an idea for the front page, like by 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's the same, isn't it? And I think it evolves so much. And sometimes I think for me, some of the best ideas actually come when I'm almost trying to go to sleep and I'm like, right, where's the pen and pad? Or, I need to write it down. So yeah, I can really relate to that.
And also, Lee, that's a fantastic idea in itself. I've seen quite a few people doing that, is actually going for a walk in the fresh air with the team, taking it outside, because actually by taking it outside, again, there's a whole vastness of creativity and rest and reassurance that means that you can think better, you can see better, and there's something about I can't remember the science behind it, but there's something about when you're walking and you're looking forward and therefore you're not eye to eye contact, sometimes it's easier to come up with something and to look at it. So again, that's a great idea. Get outside, and then you're helping your mental health as well as your creativity as well.
And I think some of my execs used to say to me that they liked going for a walk, even in the rain, because they felt less restricted by the walls around them and not oppressed. God, it sounds like it was an awful place to work. It wasn't, it was fantastic. But it's that whole thing, isn't it, about just breaking down the barrier and the situation that you're in. Which kind of brings me on to the next question about health, obviously. So both mentally and physically, health has been a huge topic of conversation since the pandemic. And do you think a hybrid model gives much more a better work-life balance for agency leaders and employees?
Oh, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Yes and no. Gosh, I sound like a politician, don't I? Yes on this hand and no on this hand.
No, don't worry.
I think it's tricky, because I think the work-life balance, number one, I don't believe there is such thing as a work-life balance, especially in PR. I think we're either focusing on our work and putting that as a priority, or we're focusing on our life and putting it as a priority. And I think the shift change that we've just been talking about comes from people being able to focus on their life. I don't think that you suddenly get to the age of 48 and go, oh my God, I've nailed it. There's my work-life balance sorted. I've read it. Just like when you read, where's the parenting manual? Where is that chapter 3 on how to deal with the days where you want to lock your children in a closet? I didn't do that, by the way. But I think it comes down to, again, leadership. I think that's fundamentally what it comes down to, and it can't be a tick box. You can't look at saying, right, okay, here's a tick box of how we're going to work for the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. The agencies that I'm talking to, the brilliance of them are the ones that are going, right, okay, well, let's talk to you and see what we want to do for the next 3 months, because actually we can't plan, 9 months into the future at the moment. It's impossible. You can have a strategy of your 5-year vision, but the key, I think, at the moment is to flex it and evolve it as time moves on, and as your team moves forward and what they need. I think the danger of working from home is it can be very isolating. It can be really destructive. As humans, we want to be part of a tribe. That's who we are naturally. So if we're not part of a tribe and we're all quite isolated on our computers and we're missing that connection, then there's a huge red flag there. People want to be part of something, they want to be part of a culture. So I think that the strategic planning going forward needs to consider team isolation, individual isolation, and how you bring that into it.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's the isolation bit is hard, I think, for so many people. I miss people really a lot. It's been a funny old year, hasn't it? And I'm desperate to get into, me and Lee talking today, when we get to Manchester, meet up and have some comms meetups and etc. But I think as well, you've touched on a lot of it, but if you're talking to sort of PR leaders within the business, what sort of tips and advice would you give them to create a really good office culture? Because for some it comes naturally, some are trying to emulate what somebody else does, some really struggle. What the kind of real key tips that you would give them, whether it's a hybrid model or not?
Collaboration and connection, they're the two things, aren't they? But I think the connection with other leaders, I think that there's a real opportunity for a new blueprint for the future of how we all work here. And I think the beauty of organisations like the PRCA means that there is that connection with other leaders and that sharing, and I think what's lovely and what's come out of it is the leaders of organisations that I've seen that have shared their vulnerabilities. you know, they're not oversharing, but they're saying, well, I don't know the answer to this, what are you doing, you know, and let's do that. And then it cascades down to the levels of the business. So I think that anyone sort of working on what they do is, it's all about connecting with the people that you work for, the people that you work with, and other peers in the industry, and looking at every single layer of your business and listening. You know, it's, as I said before, it's not just what the 40-year-old wants to do, it's about what the 21-year-old wants to do. And the key thing, I think, as well, that's really quite tricky is what you do about new starters, how you bring them on so they feel part of the culture of that agency and organisation. You know, there's a real transient marketplace at the moment, and there's going to be a huge, you know, the talking about a global shift in people moving jobs and things like that. So if you're looking at that and you've got a lot of new starters in your organisation, how are you going to bring them on so that they feel part of that organisation and they don't immediately feel isolated? What are you going to do in those first 100 days to make sure that you can, you know, include everyone? It's that inclusivity agenda.
It's so true. A friend of mine, she's gone back to work after maternity leave this week, and said nobody reached out to her. She doesn't work in PR. She just felt she's tried to sort out IT problems all day, and she's gone back to working at home. And I think that's quite a difficult one as well. You know, people in different,
really difficult, isn't it? And I think that's the thing, is that because we've become more insular and you've become more siloed working at home, what that means is that you forget to check in and you forget to reach out to other people, and therefore there's got to be an extra emphasis on that. You know, there's got to be more check-ins, there's got to be a testing strategy and how you evolve it. You know, just like we test our comms campaigns, you know, we need to test what works for our agencies and our, you know, our in-house departments going forward.
Definitely.
So what would your advice be to anyone wanting to grow their business model right now?
Talk to everyone. Don't think that you can't do it this way or that way. I think there's going to be loads of amazing things that comes out in the next 12 months of how people have managed. And I was a judge recently on the Company Culture Awards, and it was really interesting seeing how different companies are doing different things, and how they're evolving their offering and how they're moving it forward. But it's actually, and always has, I think, from a PR point of view, it's got to be a people first strategy. You know, people are the heart of PR, their creativity, their connection, their managing clients. You know, we're a people, we're a client service driven industry, you know, whether you're an in-house department or an agency. So looking at that people first environment is absolutely critical.
And we touched on this a little bit before, but well, quite a bit. Our health, both mentally and physically, has been a hot topic of conversation since the pandemic. I don't know, how does a hybrid work model give you, we said, do you have a better work-life balance? But we said no. But do you think it does give that, or do you think people obviously are getting more stressed? I mean, we talked about people not switching off before, but I think only time will tell, won't it, really? I think with new starters and everything, I think we sort of covered some of this, but
yeah, I think time, and I think it's really hard because it's an experience thing, but there's something, you know, I remember being in PR and being 25 and, you know, my boss 3 levels up at 45 saying, well, this is how we used to do it and this is what works, and you're looking at them going, really? You have no idea what's going on in my life. And I think that's what we've got to be careful of, is a bit of, well, in my day, this is what worked. But then equally, you know, the 20-year-olds, the 25-year-olds, they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow, and they're the key people that we need to be talking to about what they want and how they're going to move forward, but how they're going to manage their well-being. And I think that is an agenda that is not going to go away. And the companies and the cultures that are going to win, as well as looking at the people, they're going to put well-being at the heart of every single strategy. And I think the really difficult time, especially from an agency life point of view, is that when you put well-being at the heart of the strategy and you say, this is what we're going to do, when it gets busy, that's the first thing that falls off the agenda. And I think that needs to be as important as that client monthly meeting. You know, that's where you've got to go through your staff and say, right, okay, well, you've done brilliantly this month on this, and this, but you've not checked in with your mentor or your buddy or your wellbeing consultant, or however you frame it, but that checking in is going to be absolutely critical.
I think it is. I think people sort of work in silo on their own, whether in the office or at home, and then they think, I'm all right at the moment, I'm okay, I don't need to do any of that wellbeing stuff, and then it kind of hits you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I know I get like that sometimes, like, oh, I'm all right, and then suddenly need to do loads of yoga and meditation and disappear.
Or just have a brew with, in the fresh air, or the one of the things that I've been looking at is our stress response cycle. So every day we should be completing our stress response cycle, and we don't do it, and there's lots of different ways you can, scientific backed ways you can complete your stress response cycle. Exercise and movement is the first one, so moving within 20 minutes, because what that does is it almost flushes your system of all the bad stuff that's going on, it rids it of that. Connection is a huge one. Saying hi to someone, picking up the phone and talking to someone, seeing someone physically, which is one of the reasons why we're all struggling, because the isolation theme comes in. And then a couple of ones that I really like is you can either have a 6-second snog. Now, when I'm saying that, I'm not saying that you go up to some random person in the street, take your mask down and have a little bit of a smooch. It's got to be a random snog with someone that you are connected with, a partner preferably. And because that, and the reason they've come up with 6 seconds is because it pushes through a trust time limit. Or what might be more palatable to some, a 20-second hug, both on your own centers of gravity. But then within that, the scientific backed stress response cycle completion, there's also connection with the arts. There's also connection with a higher power if you've got a faith or a belief in something. And we should be trying to do that every single day. And, Lisa, that's just what you were saying, is sometimes we forget, or sometimes we get busy. And if we're not completing our stress response cycles daily, they're going to start, like a domino effect and a traffic jam. They're going to start ramping up and just waiting to hit us like a ton of bricks.
I think there's been some positivity about flexible working. So in your opinion, almost to conclude here, I guess, what are the best things you believe are about hybrid working?
Gosh, I think there's loads of positives, without a shadow of a doubt. I think that the positive is the ability to concentrate and be at home. I think the lack of a commute is a worry for some, but I think equally you cannot rush as much. I think it's understanding how you work better. I think everyone still needs to, during the week, potentially get up at a set time and give themselves time before they switch on the computer. You don't want to get up and switch your computer on. But I think, we've all learned to slow down a little bit. And I think that with that, what that means is we're all more aware of our mental health and well-being. And I think one of the really good things is we've really started to appreciate the things that we've not got anymore. So that office connection, that sitting in the office and having a right good natter with someone or a coffee with someone, all of a sudden we've got a different level of appreciation for them, haven't they? And a different level of need for the connection. So I think it's allowed us to readjust, but also look at what we want, and how we want to work, but also who we are and how we want to move forward with that. So I think there's loads of positives that have come out of it.
Yeah, I really do think there have been, and I think hopefully this is a change for the future, not just in PR, across all sectors of businesses. Looking at everything from wellness and obviously I'm not going to miss the commute to the office. I think when that comes back, hopefully I'll miss the rush hour traffic.
Yes.
Maybe I'll get stuck in that again soon. That's the one big thing I don't miss. But that was fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Hopefully we can meet you soon up in Manchester or Leeds and do an event with you. But I think there's tons we can touch on this subject, and I think it's still going to evolve, isn't it, over the next coming weeks, months, as people do go back to the office or not. So I suppose watch this space, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thanks ever so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. And yes, I'm well up for maybe a glass of wine in Manchester.
Me and Lee are hoping to meet up soon, so we'll let you know when that'll be. Thanks, Julie. Well, have a lovely weekend. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.